welcome everybody to April's Brownfield webinar development series. And this month we are focusing on including youth in downtown revitalization and brownfield redevelopment. They kind of go hand in hand. So while we may be talking about downtown revitalization, please know that this is also a big part of what we often talk about related to brownfield redevelopment too. This series is brought to you by our partnership at the University of Kentucky's Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky and the State of Kentucky's Brownfield Office. So we've been putting on these webinars for about a year now and host one every month on a different topic. So I appreciate you all so much for joining today. And like I said, I have my colleague, Mercedes Fraser. She's a senior extension associate and spends a lot of time focused on engaging youth around the Commonwealth. Her and some other colleagues have been doing amazing work the last few years as we've really focused a lot of attention in youth engagement. And I thought it would be a great topic. Many of our communities, one of the first things you hear is we want our young people to stay. And rarely do we ask them. And I knew that this topic is really on a lot of people's minds right now, especially as we're wrapping up the school year and thinking about how to get those kids and young folks involved over the summer. But Mercedes, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you, but really quick housekeeping for everybody in attendance today. We do not have the chat function enabled, but you will see the Q&A box. So you are more than welcome throughout the presentation and the webinar to share any questions or comments that you may have in that Q&A, and we'll sort of moderate those and keep an eye on them. But without further ado, Mercedes, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Shane, and thank you for that great introduction. I appreciate everyone being here today, carving time out of your busy schedule to learn a bit more about how we can include youth in downtown revitalization throughout our communities. So as Shane said, I'm a senior extension associate at the Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky. And if any of you have come into contact with CEDIK employees, you know we are kind of jacks of all trades. We're a bit into everything. Shane is an excellent example of that. But for me and my work, I work in rural healthcare. I do some work around community assessments and tools. And I'm also very passionate about youth engagement and leadership. I'm particularly passionate about including young people at the table when it comes to the decision-making process. So a little bit about me. I'm from Menifee County, Kentucky, in the foothills of Appalachia, and my entire county has 6,000 people in it. We're pretty small. We only have one stoplight, we have one grocery store, but we are rich in community and connection. I'm particularly, through my upbringing there, I really understood the power of community, and I knew that it actually takes effort to create that in a place and how important place becomes. Whenever I was a senior in high school, I was able to participate in a youth engagement leadership program put on by none other than CEDIK. And it was through that program I gained a lot of opportunities to better understand what it takes to make a community function. So for example, we attended drug court one day and began to understand that process. We were able to speak with community leaders and state leaders. And it was there that I saw the impact that cooperative extension can have on communities across the Commonwealth. And I felt like that was my place. So in 2014, I met CEDIK's executive director, Dr. Allison Davis. And here now in 2024, 10 years later, I am leading the program I was a guinea pig for. So that just goes to show the power of including youth in the decision-making process. So at CEDIK, we have a number of programs that do this. One that I would like to highlight are our youth listening sessions. And these have been conducted across the state, east and west, north and south. And we almost always find that they have a significant impact on both the adults and the young people that are in attendance. The youth listening sessions were really born out of these conversations we were having with community leaders who happened to be adults. They would get in a room and they would say, what do we need to do to involve kids these days? And I would look around the room and there would be no young people there. All of these adults were coming up with solutions for youth in the community and weren't asking them their opinions. From there, we developed our youth listening session process. If this is something that piques your interest throughout the presentation, please let Shane know, please reach out to myself. We are in the process of developing a youth listening session facilitation guide that you could use in your community to recreate this process and use it as the beginning of community conversation for sustainable solutions that include young people. The process for our youth listening sessions is we get in a room with both adults and youth, and we split the group. So one facilitator will take young people and have a focus group. The other facilitator will take some adults, and we ask some pretty big questions. We start off, with an asset-based question. What are some of the most positive things about your community? And then we ask a bit tougher ones. What are the biggest issues facing young people in your community today? What can we do to address those issues? We come back together in one room, we report out, and there is almost always an aha moment from the adults in the room when they realize how in tune young people are, both with their community and with the issues that are in their community. At CEDIK, we believe that placemaking is a great way to include everyone in the community. Now, placemaking is a relatively newer term, but a pretty broad definition will be that it's the creation of communities and places where people want to live, work, and play. Now, there's numerous examples of placemaking in our communities. One that comes to mind for me are festivals. So in Menifee County, we have the Mountain Memories Festival, and that's the place to go to see and be seen. And it really sort of cements our community as a destination and a place that we want to be. How does placemaking fit into your role as a community member? Firstly, beyond just being interested in making your community a place that you want to live, work, and play, more than likely you are a leader in your community. And while you may not hold an official leadership title, we believe that leaders are people with influence. And more than likely, you have influence over someone in your community. You may also be part of an organization hoping to increase placemaking in your communities. And those range from Main Street organizations or serving as a volunteer for the tourism board. And if neither of those fit you, you may just be tired of hearing people say, what can we do with kids these days? We can get them involved and active, and placemaking is one way to do that. So CEDIK received a grant from USDA Rural Development, and in partnership with Rural Development, we created the Rural America Placemaking Toolkit. Now, like I said, placemaking is kind of a newer term. Maybe you need some more information on placemaking before you decide this is the path that you want to take. We have so much information for you available in this toolkit. You can see here, this is the landing page for the website, and there's the Get Started guide. If you click there, there's a quick assessment that can help you understand your starting point for placemaking. Beyond that, we have these 4 categories: creative community conversations, community and cultural assessments, public spaces and gathering places, and cross-sector partnerships. You can click on any of those categories and you will find numerous examples of placemaking work for that category in communities across the nation. You can download easy to follow guides, you can see more examples, you can get checklists. It's really an all-inclusive, comprehensive beginning point for placemaking. Now, I'm not saying that if you check out this website and pick one of these ideas, that every issue in your community is going to be magically fixed by installing a mural. But I can say that it could spark some creativity, start moving in the right direction. Speaking of sparking, we also have the Spark Extension Placemaking Toolkit. Now, this was developed through an NEA grant, and this holds programs from the community arts agents across the state of Kentucky. So fun fact, Kentucky is one of the only states with a community arts extension program area. And if you are lucky enough to be in one of the counties that has a community arts agent, you should definitely be taking advantage of their expertise. This toolkit is filled with numerous activities to increase placemaking in your communities. And these activities have gone through Extension's rigorous standards and have worked and shown impact in communities across the Commonwealth. So as promised, I'm going to discuss 3 different activities to include youth in downtown revitalization. Here is a brief overview of each of those activities. I'm going to dive in more, discuss, sort of set the scene for each activity, and then I have a short list of pros and cons or things to consider when trying to implement these activities into your community. As Shane mentioned, there's a Q&A section. He's going to be moderating, so feel free to pop some questions in there. But I hope that this sparks your interest and gets you excited about including youth in downtown revitalization. Okay, our first activity is the Downtown Photo Challenge. I'm going to go back a little bit, like I said, set the scene. The inaugural Downtown Photo Challenge took place at the Winchester Design Studio, located in Clark County, Kentucky. In 2019, CEDIK partnered with UK's College of Design to create the Winchester Design Studio. This unique collaboration was developed to imagine new design-centered solutions for community. The main goal was to reintroduce and implement design as a process for everyone and have designers embedded in the community to help sort of change how people perceive design from high level to really practical, something that we see and use every day. Some ways that we did this, some partners through the Winchester Design Studio included Main Street, tourism, economic development, and we also had student studios actually located in downtown Winchester. So it's 2019 and Winchester is about to host their annual Sip and Stroll event. Now this event, like I said, it took place every year and the main goal was to keep people downtown for their evening entertainment. They did this numerous ways. There was live music, vendors, food, local businesses had extended hours. There were numerous activities for community members, but this was also the soft launch of the Winchester Design Studio. Our hope was that when people were milling about downtown, they would hop into the studio to see what it was about, have some conversations with CEDIK and College of Design staff about what we hoped to accomplish in the studio over the next couple years. We hope to have discussions with community members about the issues they were seeing and how maybe we could be a part of those solutions. I felt like that was something adults would be comfortable with, but I wanted to get youth normalized in the space, and I wanted to host an event and activity specific for young people. And thus was born the Downtown Photo Challenge. So a quick overview of the activity is that during Sip and Stroll, young people would come and check in with me at the Winchester Design Studio. I would give them instructions on how to participate. I would also provide them with prompts. And I can talk more about those a little later, but in general, there were these pretty big, vague topics to really implement creativity and let the participant be sort of flexible with how they interpreted that. And then they went back out into Sip and Stroll, took their photos, came back, emailed me their pictures, and they were entered to win a cash prize. You can see some examples of the photos here on the slide. Like I said, those prompts were pretty big and vague. One of the prompts was something red. There was another prompt that said on your feet. Another prompt included movement. And you can see how each artist really interpreted those prompts to create these photos. So some strengths of this activity is that it's pretty easy to run, especially when paired with another event. I would say you guys know this, I know this firsthand, recruitment can be a real issue when planning activities for young people. Their schedules are full. Sometimes it's hard to entice them with the right words, the right language, but by pairing this activity with an event that was annual, people were used to being downtown at that time, it made it very successful. It was also easy to promote the photo challenge leading up to that event because people were aware of Sip and Stroll. They knew it was going to happen. I feel like the Downtown Photo Challenge is a pretty accessible format. People were able to take photos both on their cameras or on their smartphones. I felt like that was a great way to get youth more involved in photography. They could just go ahead and use their smartphones they had in their back pocket. This activity allows people to see their community through a different lens. You guys saw some of those photos. They were really interesting and focused in on maybe these details that we wouldn't view as beautiful or interesting just in our daily life, but in the pictures themselves, they're very, very interesting. And then the photos can be used as marketing for downtown. So these would be community sourced photos for your Main Street tourism, any sort of organization to use when marketing your community. A couple of things to consider is that through cooperative extension, we are required to use photo consent forms. I'm not sure what permissions would look like through various organizations. That's just something to keep in mind. And then I was also able to incentivize participation in this downtown photo challenge, which I think, I'm going to guess, led to more people being willing to participate. Shane, were there any questions about this activity?
None yet, but I just want to add a couple things around the strengths here, because this is like Mercedes said, these sorts of activities aren't going to solve all of your problems, but what they are going to do is they are amazing places to start conversations, and to have essentially a database of images that connect with the words that young people are sharing around the things that they like, the things that create challenges, and being able to kind of connect some of that with an image can be incredibly powerful, especially in early planning stages when we're thinking about visioning or thinking about what redevelopment may or could look like, what elements we may want to preserve or secure. I think it really, there's a lot of value there beyond the competition, right? And that's the point, that you make it fun, and the things that sort of transpire as a result really pay dividends in the future as we move on. We do have one question here around this, and Alice is asking, what were some of the incentives that were offered? And Alice, I think let's listen to this really closely, because we may want to bring this to Sharpsburg as we get into summer festival fun season.
Well, that is a great question. So we chose the incentive I think that speaks the loudest, and we chose cash. And that really got people interested. And like what Shane said, whenever you make it a competition, all of a sudden the stakes are higher. So not only did we provide cash prizes to the top 3 photo participants, but they were also featured in the newspaper, and their photos were featured in the newspaper. And that's something that appealed to some of the older students. They were actually used to taking photos and have them critiqued from 4-H photography competitions, particularly at the state fair level. So this was a really great way to get them excited and engaged through a completely new process. Now, I do realize that incentivizing isn't something that everyone can do. The activity is still fun. So even if this activity were to take place with a group that normally meets, you may not have to pair it with an event that's happening downtown. For example, in Extension, if Clover Buds meet every Wednesday from 3:30 to 4:30, maybe one day you take them downtown, provide them with some of these prompts, and they can complete the photo challenge that way as well. So there's a lot of flexibility in this activity. Thank you for that question. It was really good. All right, so moving on, and this really builds on what Shane was saying earlier. My second activity I'm going to cover is a youth first impressions walking tour. Shane was talking about using these activities as sort of a catalyst or a spark for community conversation. And that's what we have found First Impressions as a program does. I'm going to briefly cover First Impressions just so we're all on the same page. First Impressions is a structured assessment program that enables communities to learn about the first impression they convey to outsiders. It offers a fresh perspective on appearance, services, and infrastructure of each community. Coordinated volunteer teams make unannounced one-day trips to communities and record their observations, as well as give some constructive feedback for the community. Their photos and responses are compiled into a fairly comprehensive report that's reported back out to the community through a community forum. And it really works as that catalyst for community conversation moving towards solutions. It's a very exciting program to be a part of. It's taken place in numerous counties across the Commonwealth. But from that, I noticed that there was a missing youth aspect. There weren't young people that were being engaged in the program that way. Not many young people are able to, drive 3 or 4 hours across the state to participate in First Impressions. And I thought, what a great way to learn from young people about their own community. A great way to do that is a youth-led walking tour. So essentially the way that the program goes is I, as an outside neutral facilitator, ask young people to provide me with a tour of their downtown. As that neutral outside facilitator, I'm able to ask some pretty big questions, such as, who is that statue even of? Or have you noticed that interesting architecture? To kind of get students chewing on and more curious about the history of their community. Many times young people become more excited as the tour goes because they realize they have some of those answers. They know a lot more about the history of their community than they expected, but they've never been asked to share it. More often than not, the students are also really focused on the assets of their community. I may ask about a vacant building, but they're way more excited to tell me about the small town Frosty Freeze that everyone there knows and loves. It also builds community interest around how young people perceive their downtown. I think people would notice a group of young people giving a tour of their community. And lots of times this youth walking tour can be partnered up with meeting with small business owners along the way. That's one of my favorite ways to sort of bridge this relationship between young people and local business owners is through this walking tour. We can hop into a local business, ask a couple questions, normalize young people being in that store, that service, and move on. It's a great way, like I said, to sort of count the assets in your community and remain strengths focused as we move through. It's also a really fun way to see community identity settle out of the conversations that you have with young people during the debrief. Lots of them have shared experiences in some of these places, such as community parks. They know about statues. They've been in these spaces for festivals before, and it's fun to watch them reminisce and see that identity come out of those conversations. Some strengths of this program is it is free and easy to do. We are just walking through downtown. It can take some coordination if you are to stop and visit with business owners along the way. And we have found at CEDIK that is actually a really strong intersection as well. Connecting small business owners with local youth has a lot of power. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next activity, but this youth-led walking tour is also a great way to incorporate some other topics such as safety, placemaking, and community design. A lot of times a conversation we have is about accessibility in downtown. As that outside neutral facilitator, I'm able to say, would someone with a stroller be able to use this ramp? Or is downtown safe for someone in a wheelchair? And it brings some of those issues to the forefront, and young people have to ask, well, how do we change some of these issues? It's a great way to have a really deep conversation about accessibility. It also allows for visioning on what could be in your community. For example, I remember in Robertson County, I was asking some students what they would like to do with this empty and vacant building, and all of a sudden they each had an idea that somehow integrated their current hobbies with a small business that would be impactful for their community. Lots of times students aren't just looking for coffee shops or things that they may perceive are in bigger cities. They know some of the gaps in their community. So many times students say, we need greater access to healthcare, or we need access to healthy foods. And what better entrepreneurial spirit than to encourage these young people to utilize some of these vacant spaces for those purposes. So once again, it encourages entrepreneurship, and this activity can establish downtown as a place for young people to be. I think that that's an issue a lot of our communities see is sometimes people wonder why young people don't want to be downtown, but if we look around, that space might not actually be designed for them. There may not be places to hang out and be safe. There may not be places to hang out where they're not going to be perceived as people who are up to no good. Some things to consider when trying to do this activity is that you do need an outside facilitator to sort of lead the walking tour. That creates this very authentic and genuine relationship with the students, because I genuinely do not know the history of the community. I'm not asking any questions with an underlying agenda. I just want to know, I just want to be interested, and they enjoy being able to educate people on the culture and history of their community. Shane, did you have something you wanted to add?
I do. We've got, I want to get to one question from the audience, and then I've got a question for you. This is related to the photo challenge. Could you share what the dollar amounts were for the prizes? And they're also asking about the time frame for the contest. Well, did it just go over the duration of that one event, or I can't remember if it was just on the sip and stroll, or if it was like that's when we launched it and it went a little bit longer. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we did 25, 50, and $100 prizes for each place. And then I had judges at CEDIK help me determine the positioning for that. So I wasn't the person who critiqued the photos. We had outside judges do that. And then first, third, or second and third place, they got 100, 50, and $25. And then this event, the downtown photo challenge during Sip and Stroll, was only during Sip and Stroll. So they did have to check in and check out with me during the time of that event. I think Sip and Stroll lasted 4 or 5 hours. I think it was from, after work around 4 o'clock until 9:30 or 10. So there was a lot of time to take photos and come in and out of the studio, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be hosted that way. If you're able to check out the Spark toolkit, there's some ways you can kind of work around and be more flexible with the process.
Great. Thank you so much, Mercedes. And so one question I have is I know in our attendees today, we have a friend and colleague, Crystal from Ohio. Welcome, Crystal. Thank you for joining us. Who is planning a youth walking tour in their community coming up, and really as a with the purpose to start some conversations. And so the question that I have is, in terms of documenting, right? So it's like, it's one thing to have the conversation and to hear the words and sort of get a sense, at least kind of anecdotally, right, of what you're hearing. Do you have any tips or tricks or hints around how we should go about documenting that or summarizing that so that it has a little formality to it, so that it has maybe a little weight as we start to share that in some of those more formal circles that are often the ones engaged in planning and setting the vision? How do we translate, or what do we do to create that conversation that feels more organic to something a little more formal that we could use as to kind of document the conversation as data or input in a planning process?
That is a great question. And I think that there's so much power in this activity, but you're right, it's all anecdotal and it's me repeating things that I've heard the students say. And it brings me to an example of a youth-led walking tour that we did, I think, back in 2018. So I'm going to give the example and then show some practices that I think are useful out of that. We attended this youth club meeting, and we wanted to conduct a youth-led walking tour. And as soon as I said that we were going to go take a tour of downtown, the students were not excited about it, not in the slightest. So I got out my big sticky paper and I asked, why aren't you excited about it? What are your thoughts about downtown before we go? And I took notes. And this was the consensus, was that downtown is dirty, it is not safe, and there are needles down there. Those were the words I was hearing. So obviously I checked with the adults in the room and made sure that downtown was in fact safe for these young people to give me a tour of. And then I said, you know what, we're just gonna go. Let's just go and do the tour. And it was amazing to see the transition that went through these students as we did the tour, as I was able to ask some, hard-hitting questions of, how long has that building been vacant? Has it actually been vacant your whole life, or has it just been vacant the last 2 years? Or I know that this person is in the statue. What relevance do they have to the community? And as students were able to sort of build out those answers, they got more and more excited about being downtown. It was amazing to watch. So we go back to our room, and we did a debrief and we took notes about what we actually saw downtown. And we compared. And what we kind of found out of that is that young people are listening to what adults in their community say about these spaces. So these young people had grown up hearing adults in their community say that downtown was not safe, that it was dirty, and that there were needles there. Young people don't have a memory of downtown as this hustling and bustling place, and they are relying on adults' collective memory of that. And they are paying attention to what we say. So I would suggest, as a way to sort of formalize, the findings, is to do that pre-post activity, compare what the perception was with what the actual observations were, and maybe work together to develop a synthesized statement about the state of downtown for young people from their perception. Does that answer your question, Shane?
I think that answered it perfectly. And I just want to kind of chime in around the power of nostalgia and in the memories of stories. Just over the last month, we were doing a sort of engaging some young folks in Western Kentucky. And when I asked the young folks what they really would love to see in their community, I wasn't sure if I was asking a group of teenagers in 2020 or 1950, because so much of what they wanted really felt like it was being looked through this lens of nostalgia, and they were kind of repeating the things that they had heard their parents talking about that they enjoyed. Yet none of them had really ever enjoyed those things before in their community because they didn't exist in their life, right? But they had these really valuable and powerful memories that were ingrained from hearing their parents talk about the good old days, if you will. So it is real. It's a real phenomenon, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up.
Yeah, that is a great example. And it made me think of a question that I normally like to ask during these youth-led walking tours. And it may sound silly, but I like to ask the young people, what is the most Instagrammable part of your downtown? It may sound silly to us, but social media is important to young people. That matters to them. And creating a beautiful space that we want to live, play, and work in, that is placemaking. That's exactly what we're talking about right here. It's a way to meet them at their level, ask a question that they're going to be interested in. So yeah, I think that's great, Shane. Maybe young people aren't looking for a bowling alley and an arcade. They're just looking for a beautiful spot to sit with their friends after school. And that's not a hard barrier to cross.
What's funny is you nailed it, because the three things were arcade, bowling alley, and skating rink. Yep.
Goodness.
Yeah.
How interesting. Well, are there any questions, Shane?
That was
Perfect.
Nope. And if you do have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll get back to them here momentarily. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the last activity, and this is a window display workshop. So once again, this activity took place in the Winchester Design Studio. And I've kind of laid some groundwork for what the studio was, but it was located on Main Street in downtown Winchester. It was in this beautiful historic building that had been renovated. I'm not exactly sure what the initial use of the building was. I think it was some sort of department retail space, but there were these two huge, beautiful windows that looked into the space. I'm going to click here so you guys can see photos. Now, we all know that normally businesses use these windows to sell the products in their shop. Well, at the Winchester Design Studio, we didn't really have a product that we were trying to sell. We wanted the community to know how invested we were in Winchester, Kentucky, and we wanted our windows to reflect that. The studio coordinator and I really enjoyed the process of creating these windows displays that highlighted assets in downtown Winchester and that were engaging and fun for people to see on their walks in downtown. So you can see here, we did have to get a little creative with our materials. The studio coordinator and I we believe in the power of thumbtacks and fishing line. That is definitely a material we used often, but the community enjoyed seeing these beautiful window displays. In fact, one of the photo examples here shows a fun activity called a community collage, where people were able to interact with the window display and use that activity to design their dream downtown. And you can see two young people enjoying that activity in the window right there. So because the studio coordinator and I really enjoyed creating these window displays, we thought this would be a really fun exercise for young people in the community to learn more about being a business on Main Street, as well as flex some creativity and create their own window display. So this took place over 2 days in downtown Winchester, and it was in partnership with a grant from the local school system. So something I think is important to note about that grant is that it was focused on the connection between young people and their community and how that impacted their mental health. So how this connection, how feeling a part of something and how having a communal identity can positively impact mental health. I thought it was a super powerful grant, and I was so excited to be able to be a part of this workshop through it. So at CEDIK, like I said, we love this intersection of young people and small business owners. And an example of how we've done that in the past was actually during the pandemic. I coordinated a program called the Regional Youth Help Desk that partnered local young people with small business owners in their community in hopes to offload social media and online marketing tasks from small business owners to young people, while also increasing young people's capability and capacity for this sort of social media and online marketing. We know that during the pandemic, being online, that saved so many of our small businesses, but not many small business owners had the time or energy to invest in learning all about social media and online marketing. It was through that program that I began to understand and see the power of delegating tasks to generations where their interests already lie, and then empowering them to use those strengths to be parts of their community. The young people that participated in the Regional Youth Help Desk loved the idea of being able to assist small businesses. They felt like a part of their community, a contributing member, and the small businesses loved being able to offload these tasks from their to-do list that maybe weren't within their wheelhouse to begin with. In fact, one of the business owners told me that she would have hired the intern that was assigned to her. There was that much impact during the program. So like I said, we love that crossover between small business owners and local youth. And this window display workshop also utilized that connection. The first day of the workshop, the students spent the first half learning more about design concepts and principles. And then we took a tour of 2 downtown businesses. One was a pottery studio with a retail space, and the other was a home goods store. So while we were in there, we encouraged the students to interact with the business owners, and we learned two things. One, the business owners do rely on their window display to draw in customers. In fact, one of those spaces, the pottery studio with retail space, used their window to sell product during COVID. People would actually window shop, walk by, call, and pick out a piece from the window that they would like to purchase. We also learned that young people weren't comfortable in those spaces because those aren't stores really designed for young people to be in. Young people aren't often going in to purchase home goods or pottery. And so by normalizing those spaces and having conversations with those business owners, they began to feel like they were allowed to be there and allowed to be downtown. Afterwards, we came back to the studio, and on day 2, the youth began to install their window display designs. As you can see, we got creative with the materials once again. We didn't have a huge budget, but you were able to create quite an impact with balloons, streamers, paper, butcher paper, the fishing twine, and thumbtacks. And the students were really able to kind of flex that creative muscle and be interpretive once again with the materials provided. So afterwards, after installing their window display, we actually invited the business owners back along with the students' parents, and the students had to articulate their designs to business owners and sort of receive critique. Not necessarily, it was all constructive, but it was great for them to understand how this window display would actually directly impact their business. It was really fun to hear the students begin to brainstorm their own businesses for Winchester and talk about how they would like to design window displays for that business. A couple of strengths of this activity is it introduces and applies design principles. Like we said, one of the main goals of the Winchester Design Studio was to show design as a process for everyone, and what better way to do that than incorporating youth. It also allowed youth to connect with local business owners and see the practical applications of design, and it allowed them to be creative. So a couple of things to consider when trying to recreate this activity is the cost of supplies. Once again, we were supported by a grant, so that wasn't as much of a barrier for us. But once again, you don't have to have a lot to make this activity work. Now, we also had physical window displays to use, but I think that this would be a really fun activity to do in a high school gym. Just use some masking tape, tape off spots for where the students can, make their window display and work from there. I don't think that that would be a huge barrier, but there is a lot of power in walking downtown and seeing these window displays. Perhaps that's room for collaboration with some business owners who have businesses that are vacant right now. It could be a really fun visioning activity. What businesses could be there? What gaps are there in the services available downtown? If you were to put this business here, would more people want to be downtown? Could more people live downtown if this service was available to them? And then there's also the coordination with local businesses to consider when planning this event. I think I see a question in the Q&A, Shane.
We do. We have a comment, and I was actually gonna and I'm glad we have this comment. It's from Cameron.
Excellent.
Who you alluded to, not by name but by position, who worked with CEDIK and is now the Winchester Main Street director, I believe, but it's not Main Street. I can't, and I'm sorry.
Winchester first. Winchester
first. Thank you.
Yes.
Cameron, I see your comment, but I can invite you to speak. Would you like to share just a little bit about your experience in Winchester, sort of engaging youth, whether that be through the window display or some of the other topics? I'm going to allow you to talk. I'm going to invite you to talk. But the other thing that I just want to share is I just want to kind of piggyback and add just a little louder voice to what you said, Mercedes, in terms of this is a great opportunity to also engage business and building owners. And in particular, as we're thinking about brownfield redevelopment and targeting abandoned, vacant, underutilized, blighted, whatever descriptor or adjective you want to use, that as we conduct our building inventory and as we begin to engage building owners in some of these sort of bigger conversations, this is an excellent opportunity to kind of invite them to be a part of the process. And whether they are hosting or housing window displays that may speak to the youth vision or what they could perceive as being in that space, or other just sort of artistic and creative endeavors in those window displays. It's a great way to activate vacant buildings and invite some of those vacant building owners to be a part of the solution. However you want to approach it. So thank you for mentioning that. And Cameron, I think I have you open to talk. So please feel free to share with us.
Yeah, thanks, Shane, for letting me speak a little bit. Um, the window displays were such a great project to work with the students, but our main goal when working with students, and it's been reiterated a lot of times throughout this presentation, is that we wanted to show the youth of our community that they had a place and a role in our downtown. And so we were engaging students in a lot of different ways, mostly through creative routes like window displays or crosswalk murals. But we really wanted to show them that they had ideas that were worth hearing and that we were going to create space for them to try out and test those ideas, because that was the big part of the design studio, is that we were testing out ideas, and not every idea worked and not every idea is replicable in other communities, but we wanted to give students a space to try out ideas because we were trying out ideas. And so even if you don't have window displays, that was a really huge asset for us, was these great window displays. But there are other ways that you can bring students into your downtown community and show them that they have a place for their voice to be heard, whether it's through creative elements, if it's through business students. In Winchester right now, we're working with the FBLA to bring business students downtown, even students who are interested in athletics. Whatever their interest is, they deserve a place in the community to share their ideas. That's all I really got to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Cameron. Um, and I just want to uplift something that Cameron said there, because I think it is incredibly valuable that no matter what place or interest your young people are coming from, part of our responsibility as adults working with them is to make sure that they fully understand that downtown can be a place for them. And I think extending that invitation in a good faith effort is part of it. And I've always appreciated the work there in Winchester. So Cameron, thanks for being willing to speak with us.
Yes, thank you. Cameron was my partner in crime for a lot of these activities at the Winchester Design Studio, and she does an excellent job coordinating Winchester First and engaging young people in numerous activities downtown. And all of that to say, these activities just help create a space at the table for young people to have discussions surrounding community issues. So by including youth in downtown revitalization, we encourage them to be creative. We remind them to stay asset focused and think about the strengths of their communities. We instill a sense of community pride and identity, and we can educate them on resources available. All of which leads up to our ultimate goal, that they become advocates for their community and members of their community. So just some quick thoughts. I'm going to wrap up on integrating some of these activities into your existing programming. A number of times, the people in our communities who are leading these programs are the same 10 people that go to numerous other programs. There's volunteers who are so passionate about numerous activities, but you don't have to start from scratch. Lots of times there's going to be student groups that are already meeting regularly, that these activities could be integrated into that programming. Don't feel like you have to completely build everything back up. These are activities that are pretty approachable for most students. There's not a ton of barriers skill-wise there. And I am going to provide you all with a binder of resources after this webinar on how to create or recreate a number of these activities, as well as numerous other design-centered activities that Cameron helped us develop at CEDIK. And they're great worksheets to just get people thinking about how design and placemaking can impact their communities. That being said, I have a list here of resources. Once again, I will provide that to you all within a binder Shane can send out. And I just want to say thank you for your participation and your listening during this webinar that I think is very important. It just, you know, Cameron and myself, Shane, we've all seen the power of including young people in these decision-making processes. And once again, back to my story at the beginning, like, this is the result is I'm so invested, not just in the community I was raised in, but seeing young people be successful across the Commonwealth. So that's all from me. Shane, do you have any other questions, any comments?
Just a couple little closing remarks. I want to invite anyone, if you have any additional questions, please get them added in, and we'll get those answered or addressed before we wrap up here. But I just wanted to kind of pull out a couple little things and share just a couple reminders. One thing in the that you mentioned that I meant to come back to earlier. You shared the Spark toolkit that has a lot of cool, really great activities. I'm going to make sure that you all get a link to that. You're going to get a copy of this presentation that will have the hyperlinks in addition to the binder and the link to this webinar today. Like I said, it'll probably be about a week or so. But one thing that I just want to bring to your attention about the Spark toolkit, because you also mentioned your local festival. And every community in Kentucky has a festival. While it may not necessarily be specifically youth-centric, I just want to bring a little connection here that if your community does have a local festival and you've ever been asked, you know, what's the return on investment? How much money are people actually spending in our community? There is a great intercept survey section in the Spark toolkit that helps communities fully understand and provides a method for how to get at that number. How much money, what's the economic impact of this festival? So I just want to bring people's attention to that in addition to the youth engagement resources that are in the Spark toolkit. But I think, you know, that was all. I just wanted to kind of make that connection for folks as they're looking through that toolkit. Just want to give people another minute or two if there are any additional questions. It doesn't look like we have any coming in. But everyone in attendance, I just want to thank you all so much for your time and participation today, for the questions and comments we received. And Mercedes, thank you so much for everything that you do. And I will sort of echo what you said, that us at CEDIK, we are blessed to have seen someone sort of get engaged early, consistently, and sort of find themselves in a position of leadership in these conversations. So, you know, I think we are ultimately blessed at CEDIK to have Mercedes as a part of the team. And for folks who are in the Commonwealth, and if you're interested in more ways that you can engage youth, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mercedes. You can certainly reach out to me and I can pass you on to Mercedes. But we invite you to keep doing what you're doing and think about additional ways to get those young folks to the table, make them feel like that is their place. And don't forget to try to create space for them in all forms of leadership, whether that be in all of those committees or nonprofits or boards. That's really where we want to see them. So thank you all so much for joining us. I see one comment from David. It's great to have you here. He lives in Madison County and working with What's Next East Kentucky. And David, if you'd like to follow up about ways we can think about What's Next East Kentucky engaging young people, I'd love to have that conversation. I'm sure we could bring Mercedes in on that as well. So again, thank you all so much. You'll get an email from me probably within the week with the webinar, the link, the resource binder. I will also add a link to the webinar for the intercept survey, because I think that's a good companion for the Spark toolkit. And we look forward to hearing from you all in the future and hearing how your youth engagement endeavors go. Mercedes, any closing thoughts or comments before we wrap up here?
Nope, that's it. But thank you all so much for your participation. And I can sense the excitement. I know that people are excited to engage young people.
Awesome. You all have a great day, and we'll follow up very soon. Thank you so much, Mercedes.
Thank you.